My name is Alice. I'm 27 years old, and almost a year ago, my ex-boyfriend tried to kill me. I've gone back and forth on whether I should even tell this story. Even now, there are parts of it that are difficult to think about. A friend of mine recently told me that if she saw this in a movie, she'd probably say the writers were trying too hard. The problem is, none of it was made up. I met Daryl a little over 3 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party. It was a normal evening in someone's backyard. People were grilling, drinking beer, playing board games, and hanging out in small groups. I had just gotten out of a really bad relationship and honestly wasn't looking to meet anyone. Daryl approached me first. My first impression of him was good, really good. He was tall, had dark hair, wore thin-framed glasses, and worked for an insurance company. He was easy to talk to. He didn't try too hard to be funny or impress anyone. He just seemed normal. The next day, he messaged me on Instagram. A few days later, we got coffee, then dinner, then another date. Everything developed naturally. If I'm being honest, those first few months were some of the happiest I'd ever had in a relationship. Daryl always remembered little things. If I mentioned liking a specific dessert, he'd show up with it a week later. If I had a rough day at work, he'd stop by with takeout and we'd spend the evening watching a movie together. Looking back now, I can see that some warning signs were there from the beginning. At the time, they felt like affection. If the weather suddenly got worse, he'd text me asking if I brought a jacket. If I stayed out late, he'd ask whether I got home safely. And if I didn't answer for an hour or two, another message would usually follow. Everything okay? Where are you? Text me when you get a chance. Sometimes it annoyed me, but not enough to think anything was wrong. One night, I was at a bar with my friend Sarah after work. At some point, I put my phone face down on the table and didn't look at it for almost an hour and a half. When I finally checked it, I had 8 notifications from Daryl. I showed them to Sarah. Don't you think that's a little excessive? He's just worried about me. Or he's keeping track of you. I remember laughing and brushing it off. Because aside from things like that, everything seemed perfect. We'd been together for a little over a year when we decided to move in together. That's when things started changing. The first few weeks were completely normal. Then I started noticing little things that didn't make sense. Daryl always seemed to know where I'd been. One evening, he casually said, "You spent a long time near the mall today." I looked up immediately because I had stopped by the mall after work, but I hadn't told him. "How do you know that?" "You told me." "No, I didn't." He shrugged. "Maybe you forgot." The conversation ended there, but I remember thinking about it later that night because I knew I hadn't mentioned it. After that, similar things kept happening. He knew which coffee shop I'd gone to that morning. He knew when I stayed late at work. He knew when I stopped by my mother's house after work. Sometimes I could come up with a reasonable explanation. Sometimes I couldn't. Then something happened that genuinely made me uncomfortable for the first time. One afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. Daryl was sitting in the living room with his laptop open. The second he heard the front door, he slammed it shut. Not casually, not like someone closing a laptop. He slammed it hard enough that I noticed immediately. I laughed and dropped my keys on the counter. "What are you hiding? Secret second life?" He laughed too, but something about it felt off. I still can't explain exactly why. Maybe it was how quickly he closed the screen. Maybe it was how nervous he suddenly looked. Maybe it was the fact that he seemed desperate to change the subject. Whatever it was, it stuck with me. For the first time since we'd started dating, I remember feeling uncomfortable around him. Not scared, just uncomfortable. Like I'd accidentally walked into the middle of something I wasn't supposed to see. After the laptop thing, I spent a few days trying not to think about it. Honestly, I think part of me knew it was weird, but if I started asking questions, I'd have to admit that something was seriously off. A few days later, Sarah and I were at a bar after work. She asked how things were going at home, So I told her about the laptop. Maybe it's just porn, she said. Then why did he close it like I walked in with a SWAT team? She laughed. Okay, fair point. Then I have no idea. That was the end of the conversation. But after that, other things started happening. One day after work, I stopped by my mom's house. Nothing unusual. I brought her some groceries, had coffee with her, stayed for maybe 40 minutes, then headed home. That evening, Daryl and I were having dinner when he suddenly asked, "How's your mom?" "She's fine." Then it hit me. Wait, how do you know I was at my mom's today? He didn't even hesitate. "You told me." "No, I didn't." "Yeah, you did." That was it. The conversation just ended there. I remember looking at him for a couple of seconds, then going back to eating. But for some reason, that exchange stayed in my head because I knew I hadn't told him. Then it was the coffee shop, then the mall, then a bunch of other random little things. Every time it was the same. He knew something he shouldn't have known. And every time I asked how he knew, I got the same answer. "You told me." At some point, it became more annoying than scary. I'd catch myself sitting at work, replaying conversations in my head, trying to remember if maybe I had mentioned something and forgotten about it. But most of the time, I was pretty sure I hadn't. Then one day, my internet started acting up. It kept disconnecting every few minutes, so I went into the storage closet to reset the router. While I was messing with the cables, I noticed a small black object sitting on one of the shelves. At first, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was part of the router setup or some random piece of electronics. Then I picked it up and saw the lens. The first thing I did was take a picture and send it to Sarah. "Is that a camera?" "I don't know. It really looks like a camera." After that, I started searching the model online. I remember sitting on the floor of the closet with my phone in my hand, hoping to find literally any explanation other than the word camera. But it was a camera, the kind people install outside their homes to monitor their property. I just sat there, staring at the screen for a minute. Then I got up and started looking around the apartment. I don't even know why. I think I just wanted to see if there were any others. Turns out there were. I found the second one near the front door, then another one in the living room. After that, I called Sarah. She came over that evening carrying a pizza because, according to her, bad news is easier to deal with when there's food involved. I still remember the two of us sitting at my kitchen table with those cameras laid out in front of us. "So, what are you going to do?" she asked. "No idea." "Are you going to confront him? And what exactly is he going to say?" Sarah shrugged. "Fair enough." After that, I started checking everything. My car, my bags, my backpack, even old jackets hanging in the closet. I knew I probably looked insane, but at that point, I couldn't stop. The next day, I found a GPS tracker underneath the driver's seat of my car. And the stupidest part is that my first thought wasn't, "Daryl has been tracking me." My first thought was, maybe this isn't his. I know how ridiculous that sounds now, but back then I was desperately trying to find any explanation that didn't involve my boyfriend secretly installing cameras around our apartment. That same night, I started packing my things. Meanwhile, Daryl was texting me like nothing was wrong, asking what time I'd be home, whether we needed groceries, what I wanted for dinner. And honestly, that was probably the creepiest part of the whole thing. Not the cameras, not the tracker, just how normal he kept acting. That night, I didn't start a fight or try to argue with him. Honestly, after finding the cameras and the tracker, I didn't need any more explanations. When Daryl got home, I simply told him I had found everything. At first, he tried to explain it. He said he worried about me and just wanted to know I was safe. Then he started saying I was taking everything too seriously. At some point, I got tired of listening. I told him I was leaving. He was quiet for a few seconds and then asked, "That's it?" Like we were arguing about something stupid. I packed my things that same night and went to stay with my mom. When I left, he didn't yell, threaten me, or even try to stop me. Honestly, at the time, I thought he had accepted it. I was very wrong. The first few days after the breakup, I stayed at my mom's house. It felt strange. I was 27 years old, sleeping in the same room I had lived in during high school, while my mom asked every couple of hours if I wanted tea. But honestly, it was exactly what I needed. A couple of weeks later, I found a small apartment in another part of the city. Nothing special. An older building, second floor, small kitchen, living room, one bedroom, and windows facing the parking lot. But it was mine. Only my mom, Sarah, and a couple of close friends knew the address. I deliberately kept it private. After everything that happened, I had become a lot more careful. At first, Daryl kept texting me. First from his normal number, then from a new one, then another. The messages were always the same. He missed me. He wanted to talk. He was sorry. We could fix things. I never replied. I just blocked the numbers. Sometimes 2 or 3 in a single week. Eventually, the messages became less frequent. Then, they stopped completely. And honestly, that was one of the best feelings I'd had in a long time. For the first time in months, I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. Almost a month passed. I started seeing my friends again. Sarah and I went out on weekends. At one point, we even joked that Daryl had probably found a new obsession. That sounds awful now, but back then, it was actually funny. Because for the first time in a long time, everything felt normal again. That's why I wasn't surprised when someone knocked on my door one evening. I assumed it was a neighbor or a delivery driver. I opened the door and a courier was standing there. "Alice?" "Yeah." He handed me a huge bouquet of white roses. At first, I thought he had the wrong apartment. But then I saw my name on the card, written in Daryl's handwriting. The realization hit me a few seconds later. Daryl wasn't supposed to know where I lived. A couple of days later, I finally unblocked one of his numbers and sent a single message. "How do you know where I live?" The reply came almost immediately. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I wrote back, "Who gave you my address?" A few minutes later, he replied, "You worry too much." I blocked him again. A few days after that, I found an envelope outside my apartment door. Inside was a photo of me standing outside a coffee shop near my apartment. Written on the photo was, "I'm glad you found a place where you can drink your favorite coffee." The picture had been taken the day before. I called Sarah immediately. She came over, looked at the photo, and said, "You're staying at my place tonight." So I did. The next day I went back home. For a few days, everything was quiet again. Then the messages started coming back. Then he started sending photos. At first, they were pictures of me outside, walking into work, leaving a grocery store, getting into my car. Every photo was recent. Every photo had clearly been taken the same day. After that, I stopped leaving my apartment without feeling like someone was watching me. Then, he sent me a photo I couldn't explain. It was my bedroom, and I was asleep in my bed. The picture had been taken at night through my apartment window. I checked the apartment immediately, then the windows, then the locks. I even called Sarah and asked her to come over. The next morning, I went straight to the police. I brought everything with me: the messages, the photos, the envelope, the picture from outside the coffee shop, the photo of me sleeping. The officer spent a long time scrolling through everything before finally asking, "Is this your ex-boyfriend?" I told him the entire story, from the beginning of our relationship to the photo from the night before. They took the report and told me to call immediately if he showed up near my apartment. For a few days, nothing happened. Then one evening, I got another message. "You really think they can keep us apart?" I didn't respond. A few minutes later, another one came through. "I just want to talk." Then another. "Please." I turned my phone off and went to bed. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a loud bang. At first, I thought something had fallen in one of the neighboring apartments. Then I heard it again. This time, I realized someone was hitting my front door. I looked through the peephole and saw Daryl standing there in a dark jacket with the hood up. I called 911 immediately. While the operator was asking questions, the banging continued. That's when I noticed the gun in his hand. I told her. She immediately told me to get into the bedroom, lock the door, and stay on the line. So I did. I sat on the floor beside my bed with my phone in my hand. Then I heard a loud crack. Everything went quiet for a second. A few moments later, I heard footsteps. He was inside the apartment. I could hear him moving from room to room while the operator kept asking if I was okay, if the door was locked, if I could still hear him. Then the footsteps stopped directly outside the bedroom door. A few seconds later, the handle started moving. Then he slammed into the door. Then again. Then again. The door burst open. He looked worse than I remembered. Pale, exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. He looked at me and said, "See? I just wanted to talk." He took a few steps forward, still holding the gun. "Why did you go to the police?" He kept talking, but honestly, I barely remember most of it. The only sentence I remember clearly was, "We're supposed to be together." Then I heard a police officer yell somewhere in the apartment. Daryl turned around. Everything happened at once. I heard a gunshot. At first, I didn't even understand what had happened. Then I felt pain in my shoulder and fell to the floor. Police officers rushed into the room. People were shouting. Someone was ordering him to drop the gun. Everything felt distant and blurry. The gunshot had left my ears ringing. The only thing I remember clearly is Daryl looking at me one last time and saying, "I'll find you anyway." Then there was another gunshot, and it was over. At the hospital, doctors told me the bullet had passed through my shoulder without hitting anything vital. Later, the police told me Daryl had shot himself before they could stop him. It's been almost a year since then. I've moved to a different apartment. I changed my phone number. I spent months in therapy, and for a while I was taking medication too. I'm doing okay now, at least as okay as someone can be after something like that. But relationships are still difficult. Whenever someone starts texting me too often or asking where I am, I notice myself getting nervous. Maybe that'll fade with time. At least I hope it will. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, is that someone constantly crossing your boundaries and calling it love isn't love, and it isn't care. I learned that much too late.